MSW Media.
Donald Trump once again taps his bench of veteran private attorneys to staff the Department of Justice by nominating Stanley Woodward as Associate Attorney General.
Trump's White House directly fired 2 line prosecutors in a stunning escalation of the war on the independence of the Department of Justice.
A federal judge in Virginia has blocked the Trump administration's attempt to fire ODNI and CIA employees who recently worked on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
There are generally no confirmation hearings to confirm U.S. attorneys, but Senate Democrats have called for a hearing for Ed Martin, as Senator Adam Schiff has put a temporary hold on his nomination.
Donald Trump has ousted the National Security Agency chief, General Timothy Haugh, and his civilian deputy, Wendy Noble, after a meeting with conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer.
And Judge Dale Ho has dismissed the fraud and bribery charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams with prejudice. This is Unjustified. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Unjustified. It's Sunday, April 6th? April 6th, 2025. I am Allison Gill.
And I'm Andy McCabe. It's been another rough week, Allison. But fortunately, we had a couple of bright spots, right?
Yeah, we
around
did.
The country in a few of those special elections.
Yeah, I remember down in Florida, we were looking at Florida 1 and Florida 6. We were also looking at New York 21, but Trump pulled his nomination of Stefanik to the UN, I think?
That's right. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations.
Because they might have lost that one. And they did make made exceedingly incredible ground up in Florida 1 and Florida 6. I mean, those were like plus 30 Trump counties, districts, and they cut those leads in half or by 2/3 in one case. And I thought that was significant. So we didn't win those seats, but man, that's has to have a lot of Republicans in closer districts kind of shaking in their boots.
I should hope so. I mean, I think it is definitely a positive sign. It's hard to say, hey, we lost 2 races. Yay, we almost won. That seems a little bit weird. But the numbers, I think, are I don't know, I guess encouraging. Could say that maybe people in those districts, some of them are having second thoughts.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get Wisconsin, which was no doubt a victory. A victory, obviously, for, I know it's officially a nonpartisan race, but certainly the judge who is supported by Democrats takes the win there. But more importantly, maybe Elon Musk takes the loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a huge referendum on whether or not Elon Musk could come into states and just buy elections, right? I was very worried about the outcome of that.
Yeah.
But so glad Susan Crawford beat Brad Schimmel, the MAGA Musk backed judge for that seat by a 10-point margin. So that was good. And then Senator Booker made us all feel awesome on Tuesday when he broke Strom Thurmond's record for the longest Senate floor speech in history, going 25 hours and 5 minutes. That was awesome, symbolic, historic. And he wasn't just like reading the phone book either. He had points and it was a speech.
Yeah, it definitely was. What a moment. I mean, like in a time, in a couple of months where we definitely seem to be searching for inspiration and, moments that just not necessarily like, win the war for you or anything, but just kind of light you up and generate some positivity and inspiration, I think, from a guy who got up there and really laid it all out. And, just the idea of Strom Thurmond rolling over in his grave, kind of satisfying on some level. I know.
Yeah. And I think he ended it that way. He's like, I didn't make this speech because of Strom Thurmond. I made it in spite of Strom Thurmond. So I thought that was great and was a good shot in the arm, I think, on Tuesday. It was a good day for democracy. But Andy, some are calling what Judge Dale Ho did this week a bright spot as well. I personally am having a hard time seeing it as a good thing, and maybe you can help me out. But trusted voices like our friend Mimi Rocha and Andrew Weissman have written pieces praising what Judge Haugh did. So let's start there. First of all, Mimi Rocah, former Westchester County District Attorney, former AUSA, chief at SDNY. She said on Thursday, she wrote for MSNBC, U.S. District Judge Dale E. Haugh dismissed the corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams with prejudice. While the order ends Adams' criminal problems for now and gives the Justice Department what it wanted in part, do not let anyone spin this away from the most important and lasting takeaway from the judge's detailed and thoughtful 78-page opinion, that the rule of law and prosecutors from the Southern District of New York and the Justice Department who resigned rather than carry out what they saw as an unethical, improper, and potentially illegal order were 100% vindicated by Judge Haugh's extensive findings. And she points out that Judge Haugh demolished the government's rationale for dismissal, not just as thin, but as pretextual. The judge ultimately dismissed the case against Adams, not because the reasons the Justice Department gave warranted it, but because of separation of powers and the practical consideration that a court cannot force the Justice Department to continue with a prosecution to which it will not commit resources.
I think all of that is right. I share your feeling that this was not a bright spot in the week. It was not a good thing. But I have to say that I come down on the side of what he did simply as a matter of practicality. There was no other realistic way forward with this that would have been productive or effective in the long run. There's really, he needed to handle this in a way that cut off the Justice Department's ability to continue to hold leverage over Adams' head, right? Which is clearly what they tried to do with this by dismissing it without prejudice, holding that threat of reinitiating these charges if Adams ever stepped out of line or did something in New York that Trump's Department of Justice didn't agree with. And Haugh squashed that potential by dismissing it with prejudice. I think that was the kind of stop the bleeding decision. You had to prevent that. And in terms of refusing to grant the dismissal, I mean, yeah, he could have done that, but he can't force the Department of Justice to prosecute. And so he was stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place. He could have taken the symbolic move and said, no, I won't do it. And then DOJ would have promptly sat on their hands for 70 days and the entire thing would have been dismissed by speedy trial clock violations, likely.
Right. Which is what I think he should have done, because there's a reason Rule 48A exists in the first place. It's because DOJ used to just dismiss stuff without any oversight from any branch, which disrupts, in my mind, the balance of power and the checks and balances that we have. So they came up with Rule 48A, saying the court has some discretion here. And I think when the court has discretion and the cards are laid out that way, that to go ahead and dismiss the charges when this is clearly pretextual, even Judge Haugh said it was, kind of negates the whole purpose of Rule 48A to me in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I don't disagree with you, but. I think had he gone the other way, maybe he gets the symbolic, he gets credit. He would have gotten credit for the symbolic defense of Rule 48A. I think probably he figured it's just not worth it in the long run. He factors in the timing of the election or the primary election that's coming up. And he seemed to think there was some advantage to getting this thing disposed of before the primary.
Yeah, but there's no rule that says that. I mean, he even argues in the whole front half of his thing that the DOJ's reasoning, saying that it was too close to the election, was stupid. Because it's about indictments and overt investigatory steps, not trials or things that happen after the indictment. And he was indicted 9 months before this happened. But he did say that his that was one of the things you have to weigh, right? Is this in the public interest? And he decided it was in the public interest to not have this butt up against the primary on June 24th.
That's right.
I disagree.
Yeah. I mean, and you can. That's okay.
Well, the other thing
disagree. Too. That's what we do here.
But there's another thing too. He said that the court concluded that no further inquiry was necessary. And conceded. He said, while some questions remain for those seeking a complete picture of how the decision to dismiss unfolded, me included, for example, what exactly was said at that January 31st meeting between the Southern District, New York, the Department of Justice, and Adams's lawyers, and what the USAO and the SDNY said in its follow-up letter to the Department of Justice, those things. The record already makes clear that at least one of the rationales the Department of Justice has advanced is in fact a real basis for the motion, that the DOJ has determined that dismissing the case will advance federal immigration initiatives and policies. So Judge Haugh said no further factual development is necessary to arrive at that conclusion, and delving deeper would not change the ultimate outcome here, because the court, even if it were so inclined, could not force the government to prosecute this case by denying the motion. Yeah, but it wouldn't change the ultimate outcome, other than we would have all the information. The public would know what happened, what led up to this, looking outside the four corners of the 48A motion to dismiss, looking at those memos that Beauvais sent Sassoon, looking at the meeting notes that, Emile Beauvais wanted to eat after that January 31st meeting. I want to know what happened there. And sure, it's going to end up, like you said, and like the judge says, in a dismissal with prejudice when they run out the speedy trial clock, because he can't force DOJ to prosecute, nor can he deputize somebody to become a special prosecutor. That only happens in contempt cases, and probably not even anymore, given more recent findings. But I wanted to know what happened, what went down. I think that's more in the public interest than whether or not we get a dismissal with prejudice close to an election that this dude has no chance to win anyway.
I get that. And I think that, you can certainly see the public interest equation differently than he does. I think part of what he struggled with here is like, there's nothing about this is typical. You don't see this from other departments of justice. And so,
right. That's the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as a result, there's not really an established method or process for deeper fact finding and reporting of those facts. Even the facts that you mentioned here, like, how do we get to that? We'd have to have, I guess, a series of hearings.
Yeah, there would be hearings.
He would have to call in witnesses. Mm-hmm. But now the court is putting itself uncomfortably in the position of prosecuting the Department of Justice in a way.
Good.
So something else.
Well, Paul Clement was like, sure, because Judge Haugh asked Paul Clement, can I even look outside the Rule 48A motion? And he said, yeah, sure, you can, but why? It's going to be dismissed anyway. And he went with that. And, I also reread Gleason's amicus curiae brief in the Flynn case. And he was like, look, there's a history here, and we have Rule 48A for a reason. And that's kind of where my, I don't kind of come up with my own legal opinions out of thin air. I always read somebody who's way smarter than me. And I agree with Gleason in this case. Now, we never got to, like you said, Andy, we never got to find out what would have happened, those hearings, for example, after, because Judge Sullivan didn't get a chance to decide what he was going to do because Trump just swooped in and pardoned Flynn. And now I kind of wish we had seen what happened there. And there is only one other case, Judge Dale Ho mentioned, in the district that this has happened in before. And in that case, the judge denied the dismissal, and the DOJ ran out the speedy trial clock. It's only happened one other time. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, why don't you go with that? Because it's too close to the election, and it wouldn't be in the public interest, is what he decided.
That's what he would say. Honestly, if John Gleason or Judge Gleason was on the bench for this case and he actually had it not as an amicus, I think he would have maybe done it differently. You can see this differently, and I think a lot of people will probably not be satisfied with what Judge Haugh did. I think the big takeaways are that DOJ did a horrible thing here. Yeah. It was likely illegal, totally improper, a really corrupt bargain from both sides, right? And we talked about that extensively. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing is Judge Haugh resolved the one issue that could have continued to impact and unduly influence political decision-making going forward, right? That's the extortion of Adams by DOJ.
He did quash that.
And he got rid of
Because
that.
if you let it go for 70 more days leading up to the election and Eric Adams wasn't playing ball, DOJ could swoop in and say, actually, we are going to prosecute this case.
Of course.
And so I think
let's say Adams pushes back and does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, look, Adams might not make it through the primary.
Right.
Right. And he's then no longer of any use to the Department of Justice. And then he gets prosecuted. I mean, that would have been abysmal.
Right.
But
so he did quash that, like you said. And he did not grant the Department of Justice what they wanted, which was to dismiss without prejudice. And it's yet to be seen. I have not yet seen an appeal to his decision to dismiss with prejudice. But Emile Bove could very easily come back and appeal that and say, no, it needs to be without because we need
him.
Yeah. Like it'll be an interesting filing for sure if he does.
You're stealing our patsy from us.
Yeah, go ahead and explain that to the court, sir.
We created this very carefully. I mean, yeah, no other human being on earth would consider doing that, but Emile Bove might.
Totally. It's the kind of thing he would do. And if he does, we will talk about it on the next episode.
There you go.
We also need to talk a little bit about some personnel actions that happened at the Department of Justice this week. And we're going to do that, but we have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Okay, let's go over some personnel actions at the Department of Justice that may have flown under the radar this past week, given everything else in the news. This reporting comes from Talking Points Memo. In another brazen step to weed out President Donald Trump's perceived political enemies and break down the barrier of political influence between the White House and the DOJ, Trump's White House directly dismissed 2 career prosecutors without reason. The firings are representative of Trump's vow to retaliate against his supposed political enemies in a department he claims has been weaponized against him. On Friday, Los Angeles-based federal prosecutor Adam Schiff was fired via email from a White House official with no reason for the dismissal given, according to reporting from the New York Times. Schiff had been working on a case against the founder of Fatburger, Andrew Wiederhorn, who was also a donor to political action committees that have supported Trump, per the Times.
Oh, interesting. Shortly before he was fired, the Fatburger guy, the Fatburger prosecutor, right? Schliefer?
Yes.
Is that how you say it? Do you know
Schliefer? I'm taking a guess at that. I guess it could be Schleifer.
Could be Schleifer. I'm not sure.
In any case, so he had been working on a case against Andrew Wiederhorn, who is the founder of Fatburger.
Okay.
And now he finds himself working on no cases, having been fired for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah. And Talking Points Memo says that shortly before he was fired, right-wing political activist and conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer posted on Twitter highlighting old social media posts from 2020 where Schleifer was critical of Trump. Quote, why is Biden holdover Adam Schleifer still working for the U.S. Attorney's Office under the new Trump administration? He is a Trump hater who has been working at the U.S. Attorney's Office since 2021. That's what she said on Twitter. Fire him. He supported the impeachment of President Trump and said he wanted to repeal Trump's tax plan. We need to purge the U.S. Attorney's Office of all leftist Trump haters. That's what she said. And put a pin in Laura Loomer because she's going to figure prominently into another story we're going to get into later.
Oh, yeah. Now, also last week, career attorney Reagan Fondren was similarly dismissed as acting U.S. attorney for the Western District of Tennessee and from the DOJ entirely. So not just taken out of the acting U.S. attorney role, which is, people come and go out of those roles, but he lost his job. And this is according to reporting from the Daily Memphian. She also received the news via an online email. In a statement on Friday, Senator Marsha Blackburn said that Joe Murphy would replace Fondren, saying that Memphis is in need of, quote, a U.S. attorney who will return to increased caseloads, aggressively enforce our federal criminal laws, and keep violent offenders behind bars so that Memphians can feel safe again. And in a statement to Talking Points Memo regarding the dismissals, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, quote, "The White House, in coordination with the Department of Justice, has dismissed more than 50 U.S. attorneys and deputies in the past few weeks. The American people deserve a judicial branch full of honest arbiters of the law who want to protect democracy, not subvert it. It's worth noting that prosecutors are a part of the executive branch, not the judicial branch."
Yeah,
that's worth noting for sure. Also worth noting that I think any one of those 50 probably has a defamation claim against Caroline Leavitt now for having been called someone who subverts democracy and not being honest by an official White House statement. That's really shocking, and I would add disgusting on the part of Caroline Leavitt.
Yeah, and the difference here, if I were in the press room right then, which I was not and will not be, because I don't work for Breitbart or Tim Pool, she's talking about the U.S. attorneys. Yeah, every time we turn over an administration, we get new U.S. attorneys. But this guy, that Fatburger guy, was a line prosecutor.
Like, you mean Schliefer?
Right, Schliefer, who was prosecuting the Fatburger case.
Yep.
Line prosecutor, not U.S. attorney.
Yeah, this is a classic statement from the Trump White House. It's totally confusing and ultimately tells you nothing because it's infested with contradictions like that, right? Like the judicial branch versus the executive branch, which she's a member of, but apparently doesn't know the difference between the two. I'm right.
Surprised she didn't quote Marbury v. Madison.
Yeah, there you go. There's 96 U.S. attorneys, I think, around the country. Typically, they're all fired on Inauguration Day. Every single one of them. That's just the way it works. They know that when they take the job, they all their resignations are requested on Inauguration Day. But the AUSAs, the line level attorneys, they stay. They are professional. They're not political. They follow the facts and the law. They're there because of the rule of law and not because of the president. But not anymore, apparently. You're a line AUSA in Los Angeles can get fired for things they said years ago on Twitter, and maybe also for the fact that they're investigating a friend of Donald Trump. I mean, that is a really bad sign for justice in America.
Yeah, I agree. And the independence of the Department of Justice, which is it's just shattered. I mean, it's just been completely shattered. There's no two ways about it. All right, next up, out dedicated career prosecutors in Stanley Woodward. All right, this comes from Politico. President Donald Trump named yet another veteran of his criminal cases to the upper ranks of the Justice Department on Wednesday, nominating Stan Woodward as Associate Attorney General. This is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for the Department of Justice. This is the department's third-ranking position. Woodward never directly represented Trump, but was a key architect of the legal pushback to the criminal cases brought by special counsel Jack Smith. He represented Trump's personal aide, Walt Nauta, in the case that Jack Smith brought over Trump's hoarding and illegal retention of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago.
And Woodward has long been a go-to lawyer for Trump's inner circle. He spent years representing Trump's social media muse, Dan Scavino, in grand jury proceedings, civil cases, and also before the House's Jan 6 Select Committee. Other Woodward clients have included Kash Patel, who was a witness in the classified documents case, and of course is now Trump's FBI director. Peter Navarro, who was convicted of contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with the House's January 6 investigation. That sounds like some great legal advice he got there. Representative Scott Perry, after his phone was seized by investigators working with Smith, and House GOP leaders who filed a legal brief arguing against the validity of Congress's effort to hold Trump ally Steve Bannon in contempt. So they argued against their own ability to hold someone accountable who contemptuously refused to respond to them.
Well, that's Republican Congress. Like, we hate our power. Please have it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all they've been doing is capitulating. I saw Woodward after I was at the courthouse to see Judge Tanya Chutkin set the trial date for the January 6th Trump case. March 4th, I think, 2024 was the trial date she set. After that hearing, We were walking out, and I looked in. I was like, "Oh, hey, there's Pete Navarro arguing his case with the." I'm going to drop in there, dude. Woodward is, I'm just going to say he's not a great lawyer.
Okay.
He's also sloppy and
that
slovenly,
came with a wink,
but I don't want to hold that against him. He also represented a slew of January 6th defendants, including Ryan Samsel, who ignited the breach of the restricted Capitol grounds, Kelly Meggs, who was convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role.
That didn't go well.
In the alleged plot by the Oath Keepers leadership to help Trump seize a second term. And Federico Klein, remember him, former State Department official?
Yeah.
Who was convicted of assaulting police at the Capitol tunnel. All of them were pardoned or had their cases dismissed after Trump took office in January. Woodward's nomination requires Senate confirmation, and the move solidifies Justice Department control under a group of lawyers who were most directly responsible for shielding Trump from consequences in his many legal struggles, starting with the first impeachment trial during his first presidential term and continuing with the 4 criminal cases he faced in 2023 and 2024.
That's right. Attorney General Pam Bondi helped defend Trump during the 2020 impeachment trial for pressuring Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate the Biden family. She was also a vocal surrogate for Trump during his criminal cases. And Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, of course, was Trump's lead attorney in the 2 criminal cases brought by Jack Smith, as well as the New York hush money case brought by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. Emile Beauvais, who holds the position of Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, which those in the business always refer to as the PAYDAG. He's a top aide within the Justice Department. He worked closely with Blanche during those criminal proceedings.
Yep. I bet he felt real good to be the acting Deputy Attorney General for a minute, wielding his power.
Flexy.
Only to be relegated to PAYDAG. I remember when I first read that, I was like, all right, come on, Principal Acting Deputy Attorney, or Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, come on. Can we?
Yeah. That's
why they abbreviate it.
Yeah, it's just too long and not very memorable.
And I think at the time it was O'Callaghan under
Rosenstein.
Rod Rosenstein.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And they are the ones who helped whip up that obstruction of justice memo that they tried to keep secret under deliberative process privilege, but lost in court. And that's where we found out that Bill Barr was basically how he quashed any ability for any future attorney general to bring the obstruction charges that Mueller found.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. O'Callaghan was also the really notable new low for DOJ when he started appearing at the White House behind the podium in the press room to talk about like gang arrests.
I remember that.
It's like, oh my God. I'd known Ed since I was an agent in New York. We worked cases together. I actually had a very high opinion of him when we worked together many, many years ago. So seeing things like that was just remarkable. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it.
Yeah, heartbreaking how some people just kind of fell into the cult, I guess.
Yeah, seduced, I think, by the proximity to power and all the things that could bring.
Yeah, agreed. All right, we're going to shift gears from the Department of Justice over to the intelligence community. But we do have to take another quick break, so everybody stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's shift over to the intelligence community. Like I said before the break, remember when I said to put a pin in Laura Loomer? And not like in a voodoo doll way, but like...
But maybe. I mean, don't write it out.
Yeah. Who's selling Laura Loomer voodoo dolls? This is from the Washington Post. The director of the National Security Agency, the NSA, the powerful U.S. wiretapping and cyber espionage service, was fired Thursday, according to one former and 2 current U.S. officials. General Timothy Haugh, or Haugh. It's kind of like it's almost a hard G, but not really.
Got it.
Who also heads U.S. Cyber Command, was let go along with his civilian deputy at the NSA, Wendy Noble, according to the officials. Like others in this report, they spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss personal moves. I want them to say, Like these folks spoke on the condition of anonymity so they wouldn't end up like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. That's what I would like it to say from now on in these reports.
Either that or on the next plane to El Salvador.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Going to CCOT. Far-right activist Laura Loomer advocated for the firings. During a meeting with Trump on Wednesday, she confirmed this to the Post on Thursday evening, that this was her idea. In the meeting, Loomer, a fervent Trump supporter, who's actually been pushed away a few times for being a little off the deep end. She pressed for the dismissals of a number of officials besides Haugh and Noble, in particular National Security Council staff, whose views she saw as disloyal to the president.
At least 5 key National Security Council aides were fired on Thursday. Quote, NSA Director Tim Haugh and his deputy Wendy Noble have been disloyal to President Trump, Loomer said in a post on X early Friday. That is why they have been fired. Loomer told the Post that she urged Trump to dismiss Haugh because he was, quote, handpicked by General Mark Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2023 when Haugh was nominated to lead Cyber Command and the NSA. Now, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the country's top uniformed military officer, Milley would have had a role in helping select the nominee for Cyber Command, whose leader earns a 4th star upon confirmation. Milley, who retired in 2023, had his security detail and security clearance revoked in January by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over perceived disloyalty to Donald Trump.
This Loomer meeting, Andy, reminds me of, if you saw that From Russia with Lev documentary on MSNBC, when in a meeting at the BTL Steakhouse or something, I can't remember, maybe BLT Steakhouse.
BLT maybe? Yeah.
Yeah. In passing, Lev Parnas mentioned to Donald Trump that Masha Yovanovitch was trouble. Just in a passing, we saw the video because he recorded it. And then Donald Trump came out firing her. She's going to go through some things and completely, tanked her career. Just from someone mentioning in passing that they were disloyal to him at some point. Yep. That's how these decisions seem to be made. Now, Noble was reassigned to a job within the Pentagon's Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. The NSA is part of the department. Haugh, who assumed his dual position over a year ago, was traveling on Thursday and could not be reached for comment. Sean Parnell, a spokesman for Hegseth, did not respond. The current and former officials say they were not aware of any official reason for Haugh's dismissal or Noble's reassignment. The named acting NSA director is Lieutenant General William J. Hartman, who was the Cyber Command deputy, according to one of the officials. Sheila Thomas, who was the executive director at the NSA, was named acting deputy, according to 2 officials.
Haugh is a cyber professional with more than 30 years of military service, including as head of Cyber Command's Cyber National Mission Force, which led offensive cyber military operations overseas, and as commander of the 16th Air Force in San Antonio. He ran Cyber Command's half of the, quote, Russia Small Group, which was a joint effort with the NSA to defend the 2018 midterm elections from Russian interference.
Oh, I see where this is headed. Okay.
That's where the Scarlet Letter comes from, apparently. The NSA portion was led by Ann Neuberger, who went on to serve in the Biden administration as a deputy national security advisor for cyber and emerging technologies.
So the guy with the most experience in the universe about preventing cyber attacks from Russia for interference in our elections, has been targeted and removed.
Yeah, well, we're not interested in that anymore because we also got rid of the Foreign Influence Task Force. So just basically, Haugh would have been an obstruction in the path of open doors to our election infrastructure for all enemies.
Yeah.
Which apparently seems to be the new policy. The thing about this, there's so many things about this that I just are amazingly dumb and surprising. But the thing I can't believe is like the week after, we're only 1 week after the great Signalgate controversy, in which the national security advisor, the guy in charge of all these staffers who got fired, convened a group of cabinet level officials for the purpose of discussing classified military information and highly sensitive foreign policy discussions on Signal, an off-the-shelf, commercially available messaging app that is not rated or confirmed or approved for use for any of that stuff. And he received nothing but support from the president and basically a green light from Pam Bondi that there would not even be an investigation. Contrast that to this week, where Laura Loomer, who comes from I don't know where, has zero experience in anything. She's, from what I understand, a conspiracy theorist and an internet troll. She gets a direct audience with the president, and 5 people, 6 people, 10 people, keep hearing different numbers on the national security staff. Professionals, staffers at the director and sub-director level get fired. It's unbelievable to me. Like, you would not take any sort of action against the NSA, who so clearly violated the rules of handling classified material and possibly violated the law in the process. Do nothing to him. But when you find out, you hear these like rumors of potential disloyalty in the histories of these people, you fire them immediately. It's unbelievable. It's like Stalin-esque.
Yeah. Although we did get the acting DOD Inspector General launching a review of the Signal chat. And this is a career person. This is a former, the former PDIG and the principal deputy inspector general. He became that in 2023. I think his name is Stebbins. He's currently the acting after all, Trump fired all but 2 of the inspectors general. So he's going to be looking into the Hegseth Signal chat and is probably he wrote in a letter to Hegseth, hey, I'm probably going to need a lot of materials from you and stuff for this investigation. So we'll see what comes out of that.
That dude should check his email constantly, because your fired message is probably being drafted right now.
Yeah, they just got to keep firing people until they find somebody who won't look into this.
Exactly.
That's probably what's going to happen. All right. Well, in a related story, Andy, Trump tried to fire employees from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, and the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, under his Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. But a judge has temporarily blocked the firings. This is from Politico. U.S. District Judge Anthony Trenga issued a preliminary injunction Monday requiring that the affected staffers at the CIA and the ODNI remain on the payroll while they appeal their terminations and seek reassignment to open positions at their agencies. Ruling from the bench, by the way, in his courtroom in Virginia, Trenga said CIA Director John Ratcliffe had made clear that the employees, who faced a 5 p.m. deadline Monday to resign or be fired, were being dismissed under a reduction in force. And that gave the employees certain protections, right? Like you got to give them 60 days notice and they get appeal rights and things like that. Quote, the plaintiffs faced termination without any suggestion of wrongdoing or poor performance, said Trenga, an appointee of G.W. Bush, by the way. Simply, I miss the days when we didn't have to put in the story,
right?
Who appointed a judge.
That did not happen prior to 2016.
It never happened, yeah. Quote, simply requiring the government to follow its regulations is a minimal burden. That's what the judge said.
Yeah, you think. Trenga didn't rule out allowing the intelligence agencies to fire the staffers eventually, but he said they could not do so until he gets a report on the outcome of the internal appeals and on the consideration of the employees for other jobs at their agencies. A written order Trenga released on Tuesday appears to cover only the 19 officials who joined the suit after they were abruptly put on administrative leave in January. Before Trenga's ruling, Assistant U.S. Attorney Dennis Bargan, am I pronouncing that correctly?
I haven't heard his name spoken. I've only read it.
All right, we're going to say Bargan, who was heckled by some of the affected employees following a hearing last month. I love the idea of that. Pressed the government's argument that the intelligence community leaders have broad power to restructure their agencies without following typical procedures. Wow, bargain. What a bargain.
No, you don't. If you're going to riff people, you got to follow the law about reductions in force.
Hey, attorney Bargain, this is the government. It's not mom's pie shop. You got to do things according to the rules. That's what they used to tell us anyway. The Special Intelligence Agency authority to summarily fire employees does not need to be a national security rationale. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. I'd love to see a cite to a case or something, but I'm guessing there isn't one.
Yeah, and this is kind of similar to what happened with when Dellinger went to the Merit Systems Protection Board twice, once with Raymond Lyman and once with Kathy Harris, to say that the probationary employees were being fired without notice and without appeal rights, and basically saying this is a reduction in force. You're not actually going to each probationary employee and assessing their performance and letting them go based on that. You are just saying all probationary employees must be fired. In my eyes and in the eyes of the law, that is a reduction in force, which requires 60-day notice, appeal rights, and a report on the outcome of internal appeals and the consideration of employees for other jobs at the agency.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that's a law. It's a law passed by Congress. So you can fire all the probationary employees once you've assessed that they are not a good fit for your agency, but you can't do it all at once. And same with these folks, right?
Yeah.
Just like the judge said, you can fire these folks, just not this way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Radcliffe's, the article says, made clear that the employees faced a 5 p.m. deadline Monday to resign or be fired. That's not a resignation if you do that. If you're told you're going to be fired at 5 p.m. and you resign, that's not actually a resignation. That doesn't have the legal effect of a resignation. You're essentially being terminated.
Right.
Right. It's just all this smoke and mirrors is kind of awful.
Yeah, I don't think they understand resign or be fired.
Yeah.
Which is when Biden came in, that's what he said to all the U.S. attorneys, right? Hey, resign or be fired.
Right.
By Monday. And so they probably think, oh, same thing, right? No, these aren't appointed U.S. attorneys. These aren't political appointees. These are career professionals who have appeal rights if they are going to be removed.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. We have a couple more quick stories plus listener questions after this quick break. If you have a question you want to ask us, there's a link in the show notes. You can click on that, fill out the form, and we'll see if we can read your question and answer your question in the show next week. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. We have a few quick stories before we get to our listener questions. First up, Senate Judiciary Democrats are pushing for a rare confirmation hearing on Ed Martin. Dick Durbin said, while the Senate Judiciary Committee does not typically hold hearings for U.S. attorney nominees, Mr. Martin's record merits heightened scrutiny. And since his nomination to serve as U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, Mr. Martin appears to have attempted to scrub much of his previous public commentary from the internet.
Imagine that.
For example, nearly 1,000 hours of his podcast have been removed from online platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, interfering with the committee's ability to thoroughly examine his record. And Andy, I'm proud to say, if I ever am offered a job in the government again, I don't feel the need to erase what I have said on the internet in the past.
Well, I don't expect to ever be offered a government job again, but if I were, I say the podcast stays. Why not? If you don't like the podcast, don't offer me a job, I guess.
There you go.
Senator Adam Schiff on Tuesday placed a hold on Martin's nomination, a move that blocks his swift consideration on the Senate floor, but also one that Republicans can easily defeat with just 50 votes.
Right. This is the unanimous consent thing, right?
Right. That's how they normally approve U.S. attorneys. U.S. attorneys are typically not very controversial nominations because they're typically like competent, responsible professionals with good career records. Mm-hmm. I know all that seems quaint now, but yeah. And so they'll usually bring a whole, a dozen or so together in one of those consent votes, and they'll all just pass, in big chunks.
Yeah. But Adam Schiff is saying, nope.
Not this one.
Yeah. And even I think Ruben Gallego is stopping unanimous consent on nominations to the Department of Veterans Affairs, as long as they keep slashing. They're about to cut 83,000 jobs from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So I think they should do this on all of the nominations. That's just me. Throw sand in the gears all the time. Why not?
Yeah.
How could it be worse? Like, explain to me how you're making it worse by blocking unanimous consent, and I'll consider your argument. But I can't think of one.
Right. I agree.
Also from The Guardian, Trump has been ordered by a judge in England to pay more than £620,000 in legal costs after unsuccessfully suing a company over denied allegations that he took part in perverted sex acts. Okay, the U.S. president brought a data protection claim against Orbis. Remember Orbis Business Intelligence?
I do.
The consultancy firm founded by former MI6 officer Christopher Steele in 2022. So as much as he's trying to, get rid of things that protect us from Russian interference and go after law firms that represented Chris Steele, go after law firms that represented Jack Smith, he still has to pay £620,000 for his failed lawsuit against Chris Steele.
Yeah, I'm going to call that a bright spot.
That's a win. That's a win.
Why not? Holy cow.
Yeah. All right, what do we have for questions this week, Andy?
All right, we've got two, I think, really timely questions that are going to kind of resonate with some of the things we've spoken about already on the show. First one comes from Paul. And Paul says, is it possible for a judge to sanction an individual DOJ attorney for making statements or delivering a document the judge finds to be untrue? I know judges can characterize an agent's testimony in a negative light, and that could impact future testimony by that agent. Does the same hold true for attorneys? Perhaps if judges sanctioned individual attorneys, they might not be willing to stick their necks out for Bondi, Bove, or Trump. Now, this is like super timely because it hits upon what's happening in the courtroom of Judge Boasberg, which we talked about last week. He's continuing to dig into this issue of whether or not the government ignored his order to turn those flights bound for El Salvador around and come back with the alleged Tren de Aragua members. So it brings up a couple of things. First, your reference to the fact that judges can characterize an agent's testimony in a negative light. That is true. What happens there if an agent, let's say an FBI agent, gets on the stand and testifies in a way that the judge believes is not true, maybe not blatantly false in a way that could get you prosecuted, but still in a way that the judge doesn't believe. If the judge says critical things about the agent's character for truth and veracity, they will have a hard time testifying in the future because those comments can be brought up by other defendants. Anytime that agent testifies, a defendant in a prosecution years later can say, isn't it true a judge once found you incredible? So for that reason, the U.S. Attorney's Office will not put that agent on the stand. That's where the blocking comes in. It's not the court saying you can't testify anymore. It's the local U.S. Attorney's Office saying, we don't want to take a chance putting you on the stand because it'll hurt our case. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mimi Rocha brought this up in the Judge Dale Ho situation because in his ruling, he said, he used the word pretextual. She said, as a prosecutor for over 20 years in federal and state court, I can tell you with absolute certainty that having a judge call your arguments pretextual would be a moment of great embarrassment and even concern about compliance with ethical rules. That's right. So really devastating. I think DOJ is going to get their lunch handed to them on this by Judge Boasberg, and that kind of an order or ruling is going to be could be really devastating to the individual attorneys involved. I also wanted to mention there's been confusion in the reporting on this, so the difference between contempt and sanctions. So what Judge Boasberg is considering is actually holding the department and some of those individual attorneys in contempt. Now, contempt of court is specific. It's a judge's ability to take action in regards to what behavior on the part of the attorneys that the judge believes disrespected the court or displayed disobedience to the court and its orders and its process. It's a very specific, very serious, the most serious thing a judge can do to discipline an attorney. Sanctions are much broader. Sanctions are it's a response to violations of court rules and things like that, where the judge will slap one side or one attorney with a financial penalty. And they can be found in criminal cases or civil cases, but it's usually a financial fine that the judge imposes, and it's for kind of a violation of process. As Anna Bauer says, make Rule 11 sanctions great again. Yeah, exactly. Contempt is like a notch higher.
Ah,
It also can end up throwing you in jail. I don't anticipate that's going to happen
no.
in the Boasberg case, but
No,
it's
I
on the
imagine
menu.
they'll have a big giant conversations about how to purge the contempt before they issue any punishments in the contempt.
I would expect so.
But Rule 11 sanctions are what one of the things you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Rule 11 sanctions are penalties imposed on attorneys, law firms, or parties who violate the rule by filing pleadings, motions, or other papers that are not well grounded in fact or law, or are presented for an improper purpose. So, okay.
It's a smackdown for sure.
But it's not as bad as contempt.
It's not as bad as contempt. Contempt is like you have undermined the court itself. You've disrespected us. You've lied to us. Yeah. You failed to respond to our orders. It's just, it's really not a good thing.
And Boasberg said that he didn't make a ruling from the bench. He's not going to rule until this week, he said. But he did say that there's a probability, a likelihood that there's probable cause for contempt here
Absolutely.
in this particular case. So I think it's coming.
It's leaning in that direction. It'd be interesting to see if he does it, what sort of effect that has on other attorneys at the Department of Justice. Are more attorneys now going to start standing up and saying, I'm not doing that. I'm not taking that position.
Right. Are we going to see a bunch of resignations or?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not saying like, oh, they're all going to be walking out in droves, but it'll be interesting to see if people start pushing back on the AG. Yeah. Okay. So our second question here comes from Jeff. And Jeff says, how can Elon Musk's activities paying people to canvass for a Wisconsin Supreme Court election, paying people who sign a petition, or giving away $1 million checks in relationship to an election, how can any of this be legal? And how can we stop it and hold him accountable? This, of course, is referring to the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin this past week, in which Musk did all those things. He paid people to canvass, to go out and knock on doors and try to, get people to turn out to vote for his preferred candidate. That's not illegal to pay people to canvass. He also handed away $1 million checks to people supposedly at random for showing up at these rallies, but the people who received the checks did not seem like random selectees in any way. One of them was the head of the college Republicans and all this other nonsense.
He also even said, I'll give you $20 every time you take a photo of yourself with Brad Schimmel and a thumbs up or something like that at up to $1,000. You can make $1,000.
There you go.
Posting that on social media.
That stuff is all gross, but it's not illegal. Where he gets close to illegal is in paying people to sign a petition, which I think also includes some language about your intent to vote for Trump. It's not clear if that's illegal or not. The problem is it hasn't actually been challenged in court yet. It could be, because it is illegal in this country to pay someone to vote a particular way. It's possible that this could be interpreted by a court as essentially the same thing as like you've all heard, everyone's heard this like myth about like people scalping tickets outside of an arena and saying like, here, if you buy this picture of my dog for $1,000, it comes with 2 front row seats to the show, and that is not legal. It's goofy, and it does not get you out of jail for having scalp tickets.
He didn't say he was a cop. He didn't tell me he was a cop, so it doesn't count.
Exactly.
But Josh Kaul, Attorney General, tried to sue to stop this, and it went all the way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, ironically, and they wouldn't hear the case. But I am not familiar enough with, I know, first of all, Pam Bondi's not going to bring anything.
Not a chance.
No.
Not a chance.
But I'm not familiar enough with Wisconsin state election law to answer this question. But that shouldn't stop us from giving Josh Kaul a phone call or a local DA in Dane County, for example, to see like, hey, at least look into this. I can't answer the question with enough authenticity or knowledge because I just am not familiar enough with Wisconsin election law.
Yeah, my only message on this one is it's possible that a court in which it's pretty much illegal everywhere to pay someone to vote, right? You're not supposed to do that. And it's possible that you could interpret what he was doing within the scope of that prohibition, but it needs to be challenged. It's got to be somewhere. He's got to get sued or prosecuted for doing it. And we won't really know until that happens.
Yeah. And I know that that Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania tried to sue as well. And those lawsuits got shot down. Also, when Musk was giving away $1 million checks, he was calling it an illegal lottery.
Right. That's right.
So,
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. But I've been writing to folks in Wisconsin, to district attorneys and the attorney general, saying, "Hey, could you look into it?" And you're going to have, I think, better luck outside of the WOW counties. Maybe if you look in Dane County or a county where they've got a more amenable district attorney to this kind of thing. But we'll see. And if we do get those charges and or lawsuits, we'll obviously let you know.
Heck yeah. Yes, we will.
All right. Great questions. Thanks so much. Again, if you have a question, there's a link in the show notes. You can click on, fill out the form, send us a question. We'll read it on the air. We really appreciate all your questions. We really appreciate all of our listeners as well. Thank you so much for tuning in every week to Unjustified. We really appreciate it. It's not as fun as the Jack podcast, but it is as equally, or if not more important, that we keep an eye on what's going on with the Department of Justice here in this Trump administration. So thank you for listening. Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the week, Andy?
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with what you're saying. I really feel like DOJ is in the eye of the storm here, because all of these things, whether it's the firing of government employees, or whatever actions DOJ is taking against the agencies, so many of these things are going to be challenged in court. And it's going to be the Department of Justice that goes in to represent what Trump is doing, just like you're seeing in the immigrant case to El Salvador that's in front of Judge Boasberg. So it's really the great kind of catch point where you get to see how the courts are dealing with the many different actions of this administration. I know it's tough to try to keep up with these things, especially after a week like this, where we've all been like, our heads have been spinning with the news lately with these crazy tariffs and the massive changes to our economy and to people's economic well-being that might be negatively impacted by what we see happening here. It becomes hard to kind of focus on all this stuff, but all you got to do is tune in every Sunday and you'll get the wind up from you and I in terms of what's happening over there at DOJ in the eye of the storm.
Yeah, awesome. And we appreciate you listening, and we'll be back in your ears next week. Thank you so much. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Andy McCabe.
Unjustified is written and executive produced by Allison Gill, with additional research and analysis by Andrew McCabe. Sound design and editing is by Molly Haugh, with art and web design by Joel Reeder at Moxie Design Studios. The theme music for Unjustified is written and performed by Ben Folds, and the show is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned independent podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, please visit mswmedia.com.